Hi, everyone. Welcome to True Disabled Story. My name is Nico, and I use he, him pronouns. I'm a white man with blonde hair, large blue and brown spectacles, and a dark shirt underneath a gold zip-up hoodie. I'm seated against a purple wall and some bookcases. This is my home office. Like roughly 25% of Americans and a full 17% of Philadelphians, I am disabled. And whether we look locally, nationally, or globally, disabled communities are full of dynamic, diverse, and frankly delightful people with their own stories to tell. All that we have to do is listen. For this video, I'm joined by Michelle. So we're eager to hear her story. Michelle, how are you?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So Michelle, what was your path to diagnosis like? Was this a surprise? Did it come out of the blue? Or was this something that you maybe like you were actively pursuing or seeking out? Paint that picture for us.
Well, it was a little of all of that, actually. It really was a surprise in that, like most women who have late diagnosis ADHD, uh, it really wasn't caught early on, because it really wasn't recognized in in girls. It really was kind of the stereotypic, you know, what does it look like in little boys who are hyperactive? And I suppose I had the caveat of, so I'm an identical twin, and my identical twin, uh, we can't say for sure, but we don't believe that she has ADHD. Um, she's never struggled with some of the same things I have, but my masking basically reflected her. She was successful at making friends, at kind of following the social norms, and I just masked as her. So it was, I guess, from a societal point of view, I was successful. um, from outward appearances, I moved through the world in this normative sense. People didn't really pick up on me being anything other than neurotypical. So, and I suppose I should start with, so I I am a white Latina, um, living in Minnesota. I'm currently 34. And so it I didn't really embrace my culture, my heritage until I was probably in college because in Minnesota it's very homogenous. And both my parents are from the country of Chile. So I'm, you know, I'm a Latina woman, but I suppose I was very white passing. I didn't have an accent, anything. So there was also that. I mean, I flew under the radar in a lot of ways, a lot of my different identities. Um, School was always easy for me. I always struggled with the idea. I made jokes that I think I missed the class on how to make friends. Um, I never had my friends. I had my twin sister's friends. Um, I was just always tagged along. But I was quote unquote successful. I made the good grades. I was the quote unquote smart twin, and except my brain didn't math, and that was acceptable. That was an acceptable pass. Um, so it wasn't until my twin and I started experiencing mental health issues in terms of our depression and anxiety in college, where then I started to struggle because I didn't have this crutch of my twin kind of being my buffer to the world. Um, and and suddenly then like the walls came crumbling down around me. It's oh, I don't function in the world as an individual. Um, I never had to learn because I had my twin sister as this somewhat of a crutch. Um, and the focus then was more on, my crippling anxiety and depression at the time. I lost my identity when my twin sister and I had a falling out. Um, in a very real way. Like I really didn't seek to make my own place in the world. Um, and I was just lacking all of these common skills that people just grew up with. So that's when I first sought treatment. And I mean, I tried everything before I would even deign medication, just because I grew up with parents who holistic methods were the norm. They had a mistrust of medication. And I don't blame them at all. Also where they're from, mental health wasn't spoken on. Pretty sure my dad would support this, and we're pretty sure he's just never been diagnosed. He's probably autistic or on the spectrum. Just based on some of the work that I've been through in my diagnostic journey here. Um, but I digress. We'll get to that. um, so kind of end of college, after I've tried the diets, the working out, the natural supplements, and I still was not improving. In fact, I was really getting to a low point, really the end of the line for me myself. Um, Finally started to take medication, and that was really the only thing that really turned me around. And then we could focus on, well, why don't I have these skills and how can I build them? Um, it was a long journey into, you know, I'd say first we were treating it as just anxiety, depression. Michelle just needs to catch up from her childhood. And as I progressed, and like I said, that was end of college. I think I started to get fully medicated at 24 years old. I'm now 34, so a whole 10 years later. Um, so we started from the viewpoint of me just needing to control the anxiety, depression, and kind of looking at it from that neurotypical viewpoint to finally, I think it was last year, from burnout, from yet another spat with my twin sister that really sent me spiraling, where I had to go on disability and take a step back. And I was in a partial hospitalization program because I wasn't functioning anymore. Um, we we took a deep dive and talked more about self-acceptance. Um, so stop labeling myself as I'm just lazy or I just procrastinate, and we started to really look at, what was lacking in my environment, stop treating me as disabled and start making my environment what I needed it to be. And suddenly I could open up about things that I never, that I had this like ingrained shame about that I couldn't talk about. That even something as silly as I would skip meals because I didn't even realize I was hungry. Like, um, I, I, it's, I was a bedwetter when I was little for a long time, and we realized that some internal signals were just not getting to my brain in the typical way that people would experience. And that led to a whole battery of, well, that's very common in, you know, individuals with ADHD. Have you ever sought a diagnosis for that? I'm like, no, I'm not a hyperactive person. Ga- I gave into the stereotypes too. Um, but looking into it more, it really became clear. Even the way I react, the the thoughts and feelings of like, oh, I being human doesn't come naturally to me. I have to put on this act to get through a workday, or to get through this social interaction. And that, even like, I would listen to people say that they had these scripts in their head, and it's almost like I wouldn't even like acknowledge, because I've been doing it so long, it didn't feel like a script in my head, but it really was. So it wasn't until actually early this year, so 34, and I just got diagnosed. So long road. And I was hesitant to get diagnosed, as when I got into self-acceptance, I don't feel the need to change who I am. I just want I just like the understanding of why I am the way I am, and how to help myself in my environments. So especially at work, it's been very helpful to know what helps me be successful in my environment and how to communicate that to others. Um, so that's been incredibly helpful, but it's been a long, long journey.
It sounds like it. Michelle, thank you for being so forthcoming and sharing uh honestly what those twists and turns have been like for you.
Yeah.
You've really painted a good picture of what that pursuit of diagnosis has looked like. So, what impact has your diagnosis had on your life? And you can take this professionally, personally. We all exist in many different communities. So, I'm eager to hear more.
Yeah, for sure. It's been incredibly helpful, and in basically all aspects of my life, but in most, I would say, just in my own sense of well-being, um, to stop labeling myself in such negative terms. I mean, oh, I'm lazy, I procrastinate. Like, I think even just the finding community, or in the on the internet, um, knowing that I'm not failing at friendship, I just have different needs in what friendship looks like. Um, and that's okay. That's different is not bad. Um, and I think it helps other people know to have expectations, to set their expectations as well. See a lot of toxic things online, like, if they wanted to be there, they would. If they wanted to talk to you, they would. And I'm like, okay, no, I really do like you and would love to keep you in my life, but I sometimes can't. I mean, I also have the diagnosis of hypersomnia. Sometimes being awake is a struggle. Like, so no, I really can't talk to you some days. Like, so it's been nice to even have a name for it, to put out there. And I know that's not everybody feels comfortable in that. I have I have loved to be able to put it forth, because I've found other people then feel more comfortable also putting forth what they're comfortable with, like creating this psychological safety, um, which I find very important. And just that you don't necessarily need that diagnosis either. Like, I struggle. with sharing the actual diagnosis, and I just go with neurodivergent and say what my preferences are, unless somebody asks, just because I feel like you don't need to meet a diagnostic requirement to have some of these needs. And I would hope that everybody would feel comfortable requesting, like, if they need something different than what's standard out there. If if you need to not have this camera on because it took me a long time not to just stare at myself in the camera and monitor my face, it it should be okay to have the camera off. And it seems just bizarre to me that some of these are just considered, oh, if you don't have a disability to ask for that, then you can't ask for that.
Yeah,
It
valid. Sorry, go ahead.
no, that's it's just there's some professionalism here we need to dismantle.
Yeah, I see this in myself and in my disability communities as well. When disabled people ask for accommodations or ask for supports that non-disabled people are even slightly unfamiliar with, it's always easier to like denigrate, right? Or it's almost as if no one's asked a question before. It's really shocking how little people think, I guess I would say, how little people think of what all encompasses access needs, right? So I appreciate your perspective there. As we come up on our last two questions, which are kind of a little bit shorter, I really want to thank you for your time and for sharing your story. It's been, this is only my second full day of recording these videos, and already the stories that I've been hearing have been, very powerful and super impactful as well. So, Michelle, your story talks a lot about masking, about maybe judging yourself and things like that. Now, if you could go back in time, right? And so as far as I know, humans haven't invented time travel yet, but if we did, right, what advice would you give people with your diagnosis? Or even what advice would you give your younger self?
Oh, I oh, that's a tough one. Problem is two different things. I have the very specific background of having an identical twin that I think not a lot of people with that an identical twin who does not share my diagnoses. Um, and I think that for me particularly, I would tell myself that I need to stand on my own 2 feet, that I can celebrate being a twin and still be an individual. Um, because I mean, I didn't even accept that as a possibility for so long, which just made it so I couldn't explore my own needs. Um, but for people for the general populace, if I were to go back in time and impart my knowledge, it would truly be that that you are not disabled. You are Places are just not set up to help you, and you need to figure out what can help you. Um, because I don't mind the term disabled or disability, because yes, I have been on disability and I have truly been disabled at times. But in general, like, you are not in general disabled. Like, my need for all of the words before a meeting, my need for context is not a disability. My inability to jump on a quick chat about this, it is not a disability. No, you need to give me words. I need to be prepared. And it's okay to request that. my lack of the lack of urgency or dopamine for me to do a task is not me being lazy. I just need to figure out how to help my brain do the things. So I just all of those all of those terms that disabled me growing up were so detrimental and caused such ingrained shame for so long that I truly just don't want those. And I feel like so my dad and my older brother are undiagnosed, but we're just kind of going off of, what they need. And um they're neurodivergent, but you know, they're not seeking diagnosis, and that's fine. Um, but they were allotted a lot of things. They're just unapproachable, not social, um, unmotivated. No, there's there's such ugly terms. Like, can we just find what they need, what makes them happy? So that's what I would say. You just need to figure out what works for you and not make it some sort of moral failing.
Yeah, Michelle, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your perspective. I definitely can drive with your social model of disability type experiences. Absolutely. My last question is one that I ask all of my interviews, regardless of project. Where can people find you online? Michelle, this is your chance to really like promote yourself, share any recent wins you have, be your own cheerleader. I'm giving you a soapbox, so hit me.
Oh, I appreciate that, Nico. Just little old me. No, just kidding. I you can mostly find me right now on LinkedIn. Believe it, whatever, LinkedIn, and then it's let Mengstrom because it's let me, the E bleeding into Angstrom, just because that's my my freelance name for when I do design work
Oh,
freelance.
fantastic. Okay.
So I do off and on do freelance graphic design. I'm setting up freelance for presentation design, but on LinkedIn mostly I focus on inclusive design. And I make an effort to make resources for people to make designing inclusively easier for non-designers. Um, Even just recently, I I saw a I saw quite a few people in my instructional design community making quote unquote pretty resumes. And I'm like, you can have both. It can be accessible and beautiful, and I can show you how. So, I guess if you want to follow me, I will be making a series on that on LinkedIn, free because I don't like to gatekeep accessibility. And that's really just for now, that's mostly where I'm at. I do have an Insta, but I don't have anything on it because I also have two kids under 5 years old and just
Sure.
have
Yeah.
none of the time. So
Understandable. Entirely so. Well, Michelle, it sounds like you found a real cultural niche on LinkedIn, getting that instructional design video series out there. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to see what you do next.
thank
Thank
you
you for
so
your time
much.
today.
Yeah, and thank you so much for doing this, Nico, because I think it's a very important subject and there are so many varying experiences. So thank you for giving us
Yeah,
a platform to talk about it.
of course, absolutely. All right, take care now.
You too.